Amazing moment. Millionaire revealed his pain when a janitor discovered his hidden struggle. Jake Thompson stood in the sleek corner of his office, overlooking the shimmering skyline of Seattle as the city lights flickered like distant stars. It should have felt exhilarating, a reminder of his achievements. Instead, a gnawing emptiness clawed at him. The success that had once fueled his ambition now seemed like a chain, weighing him down. What was the point of the penthouse, the luxury cars, and the sprawling bank account? He had built the empire of his dreams, but in chasing wealth, he had lost himself, leaving behind a hollow shell in a world that felt increasingly isolated. An anxiety attack tightened its grip around his chest as he thought of the quarterly meeting scheduled for the following day. A monumental decision loomed: expand the company or stay the course. Every option felt like a betrayal of his newfound awareness. The more he thought, the more the edges of his reality blurred, confidence giving way to self-doubt. Would greed consume him again? What if he jeopardized the fragile connection he had begun to forge with his own humanity? He could already hear the relentless mantra in the back of his mind demanding more. More wealth, more power, more distance from the person he wanted to become. He paced the confines of his office, feeling foreign in a space intended to represent success. Suddenly, Maria Rodriguez, the building's janitor, caught a glimpse of him through the glass walls. Her figure moved with purpose, yet burdened by the weight of an ordinary life. He could see her worn hands, evidence of the sacrifices she made, the grit and determination she possessed, a stark contrast to the battles he faced within. Solitary moments like this were painful reminders that reality was filled with human struggles he was determined to ignore. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, curiosity pushed Maria to step into his office, her hands clutching the edges of a worn journal she had found while cleaning. She paused, her voice tight, looking for the right words. The air felt thick with unsaid truths as she opened the journal to reveal Jake's raw confessions about anxiety and the pressure to succeed. He couldn't look her directly in the eye. Instead, he felt the prickle of embarrassment creeping up his spine, the vulnerability laid bare. As she read, something inside him began to change. Maria's empathy was palpable, a bridge forming between their worlds. But with each word she spoke about family sacrifice mirrored through his own, he felt the weight of their realities merge and amplify. Her struggle was not unlike his. Both were fighting their own invisible demons, yet society had placed them on opposite ends of a never-ending divide. Would he admit to her that their fates were inextricably linked? Or would he retreat to the comfort of his penthouse, forsaking the humanity that had begun to awaken? The impending decision about his company loomed over him, tension tightening its grip. Will he abandon the lessons Maria's story inspired, or plunge into the depths of ambition that once defined him? He could sense time slipping away, uncertainty lurking behind each breath, as the foundation of his world danced on the precipice of profound change. Jake's heart thumped in his chest, a rhythm that matched the frantic thoughts swirling in his mind. Maria's steady gaze, reflecting an understanding that felt almost ethereal, forced him to confront the dichotomy of their lives. She wasn't just a janitor. She embodied the unsung narratives of resilience and struggle. He swallowed hard, battling the embarrassment of feeling so starkly naked in front of someone he had previously regarded as beneath him. But now, he was aware that it was he who had been living in the shadow, blinded by his obsession with success. "Why did you keep this?" Maria asked, her finger brushing over the pages that held the weight of his buried fears. That he wrestled with 1,000 retorts, grappling with a mix of defensiveness and a longing for connection. This moment pushed against the walls he had meticulously built around himself. "I guess I never intended for anyone to see it," he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, acknowledging the walls he had constructed while simultaneously demolishing them with her compassion. Her own struggles began to mirror his, confessions of worry, doubt, and the unmistakable grip of fear threaded through the narratives of their lives. He found himself wanting to offer her more than just a corporate acknowledgement. He wanted to give her pieces of his inner turmoil, a paralleled honesty. What if I told you that those pages could help someone? Maria pressed, her voice steady, challenging him to confront his own insecurities. What if they resonate with someone who feels hopeless? Jake's thoughts spiraled. He had been living for the accolades, the financial reports, the line graphs that chronicled his rise. For years, he had equated success with status, thrusting emotion aside in favor of cold, hard metrics. But here was Maria, inviting him to consider an entirely different measurement of worth: authenticity, connection. Could this new path serve as a foundation instead of those constructed solely of monetary gain? Are you suggesting I turn it into something? He asked, more to stall for time than from genuine inquiry. The notion felt so foreign yet illuminating. Maria smirked, the corners of her mouth lifting as if reveling in the irony. Yes, let your pain be more than a secret. Share it. Inspire others who might struggle in silence. She urged as the weight of her words settled into his mind. He imagined the potential of an entirely different venture, conducting workshops, writing a book, using his platform for connection rather than validation. In the blink of an eye, he could envision walls of glass breaking down, replaced by dialogue and shared experiences. His rational side recoiled at the thought, fearing the vulnerability it required, but something deep within urged him forward. Maybe I should, he murmured, contemplating the transformative power of authenticity within a world that adored appearances. Maria stepped closer, interest ignited. You have something unique to offer, Jake. Don't allow fear to take that away. He knew he had a choice to make, one that could redefine success itself. As thoughts of the upcoming quarterly meeting paled in comparison, Jake felt a stirring determination within him. He could, perhaps, lean into his fears rather than retreat from them. For the first time in years, light broke through the shadows clouding his mind. The decision to harness vulnerability felt daunting yet exhilarating, a duality that burned brightly in his chest. But the clock was ticking, and the meeting was just a day away. Would he take the leap and use his voice for change, or would he allow fear to pull him back into his luxurious cage? As he stared at Maria, uncertainty danced in the air between them. The time had come to face his reflection in the lives around him. Was he ready to embrace the vulnerability that might just save him, or would he retreat one last time? Jake's thoughts whirled violently in the quiet of the break room, Maria's face an anchor amidst the chaos. She had ignited something in him, a flickering flame of purpose that battled against the winter of his insecurities. He could not yet fully grasp the implications of what he might do. Yet the thought of sharing his vulnerabilities stirred a mix of exhilaration and fear deep within. He found himself pacing as he recalled the starkness of his daily life. Meetings filled with numbers, faceless interactions, and a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction. Each quarterly report masked a deeper unrest, but Maria had stripped that facade away. She had encouraged him to feel rather than merely exist. Jake contemplated what the world might look like if he stepped into the light, revealing the man behind the meticulously polished image. The image of his upcoming meeting loomed over him like a looming storm cloud. His colleagues would likely assess him through a lens of skepticism, their reactions rooted in ambition, similar to his old self. But could a path forged in authenticity resonate with them? His heart raced as he considered the risk. Would they laugh at him, seeing only weakness? Or might they find a resonance that welled up from their own struggles? Crisis often lays the groundwork for growth. Jake clenched his fists, feeling the tension pulse through his arms. In that moment, he made a decision. He would use the meeting to unveil his truth, to share more than numbers and projections. After days of denying himself the chance to connect, he was ready for something real. Jake took a deep breath and revisited the pages Maria examined. The chronicle of his lowest moments felt raw, yet perhaps they whispered the truer narrative of his existence. His anguish was a testament to the climb he fought through, and therein lay not merely his fears but seeds of strength. Embracing that narrative could transform not just his life, but potentially inspire others to confront their own struggles, however private they might be. As he readied himself for the day ahead, the hours seemed to stretch languidly. The clock ticking away was a reminder of both looming dread and upcoming purpose. The usual banter among his colleagues, where suit-clad professionals discussed trivialities, suddenly seemed trivial. Each interaction felt like a stage upon which he played the role of a perfect executive far too long. Yet once more, doubt crept in, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. He had witnessed the relentless pursuit of perfection around him, always glossing over emotional frailty. What if succumbing to honesty shattered whatever respect he had built? A voice in his mind taunted him, warning against sharing too much, urging him to retreat to safety. But there, in the stillness where vulnerability nested with courage, Jake found clarity. Real strength lay not in his net worth, but in the choice to open the creaking doors to his past. He envisioned standing before the boardroom, the cold stares of his peers softened as he peeled away his layers. As he rested his hands on the conference table on the day of the meeting, Jake felt the thrum of adrenaline. Would he take that step into uncharted territory, risking the opinions of those around him in exchange for authenticity? In the seconds before the meeting began, a thought flickered. What if this was the conversation I had been waiting for, the one my soul had craved? The stakes had never felt higher, yet for the first time in years, he felt alive, ready to confront the impending moment with possibility rather than fear. As he opened his mouth to speak, the weight of anticipation mingled with determination within him. Suddenly, the agenda didn't matter. Everything hinged on this profound moment. Would they honor his truth, or would ambition drown it out? Jake steeled himself for the answer, feeling an almost electric connection to his purpose unraveling before him as the gathered faces turned to him. The time had come for clarity or chaos, and he was poised at the precipice. Would he leap? Jake stood at the conference table, poised and waiting, the bright fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow on the gathering of familiar faces. For years, he had navigated these meetings with a practiced ease, exuding confidence forged in numbers and projections. Yet today, with the weight of his unspoken truth pressing down on him, that confidence felt fragile. The first few moments were punctuated by the customary pleasantries, but his mind raced. He was conscious of how well-polished his professional persona had become, yet each polite nod from his colleagues felt like another layer of armor he had donned. He was expected to deliver the meeting agenda, the facts, the forecasts, the analysis, yet the urgency to unveil the man beneath that armor consumed him. What if they didn't see a leader today, but simply a human being? Clearing his throat, Jake caught the eye of Max, his manager, who wore a skeptical expression, as though prepared to dismiss anything that strayed too far from the company line. The thought sent a surge of panic through him, but he pushed it away. This was not about Max or anyone else in the room. It was about him taking a leap of faith into what could either be vulnerability or empowerment. He began his presentation, but the words felt hollow, rehearsed. Numbers filled the space, outlining the performance of the last quarter, but they felt detached shadows of his experience rather than reflections of their importance. Summoning what felt like an ocean of inner strength, he shifted from his prepared slides. "I'd like to share something a bit more personal today," he stammered, almost surprised at the words spilling out. The room quieted, and he could feel the collective breath held, weighing the air. "My journey here hasn't been just about profits or market shares. It's been profoundly shaped by some challenges I've faced, experiences that have tested my resilience and forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities. A few months ago, I reached a point where I felt completely lost." As he spoke, he began to share fragments of his life. Confronting the darkness of isolation in a crowded office, the tension that gnawed at him late at night, that sense of inadequacy he had pushed away for far too long. These moments, once secret and shameful, began to spill into the space of the boardroom, each word bathed in a purpose greater than himself. He saw the flicker of surprise in the faces of his colleagues and felt the nervous energy shift, morphing from skepticism to curiosity. Someone in the back shifted in their chair, and he thought he caught a glimmer in their eyes, recognition of their own struggles. Jake's grip on the edge of the table tightened as he realized he was no longer merely recounting statistics or projections. He was inviting them to connect, to understand that beneath their business attire lay a myriad of human experiences. Perhaps they, too, had faced similar shadows. The silence that enveloped the room was palpable. As he concluded, he felt exposed but liberated, as if a weight had been lifted. I don't have all the answers, nor do I expect you to follow suit, he added, glancing at each face. But I am convinced that there is strength in sharing our burdens. It can fuel our collaborative spirit and inspire growth not just as individuals or a company, but as a community. The initial quiet thickened with contemplation. When he finally resumed his seat, the silence remained, charged with an unspoken understanding. This was unprecedented. He had unveiled a piece of himself, challenging the corporate facade they all hid behind. Jake's heartbeat quickened as he noticed nods around the table, probing looks that said maybe he wasn't as alone in his struggles as he thought. The meeting's agenda felt obsolete. What mattered now was this raw, unfiltered connection he had initiated, a ripple of authenticity that had been dropped into their professional pond. But amid the sense of victory was a creeping uncertainty. Would it maintain momentum beyond this moment? Or would his colleagues retreat to their usual roles? Would they embrace this newfound openness or slip back into the comfortable confines of ambition-driven conversations? As the meeting wrapped up, Jake could feel the lingering energy, but the tension of the unknown gnawed at him. The true impact of today's revelations awaited. He stepped out of the conference room, encouraged by the spark he had ignited, yet aware that the journey was just beginning. What would happen when they returned to their daily routines? Would he have the courage to continue unearthing his truth, or had he only scratched the surface? As these questions swirled in his mind, Jake felt a flicker of uncertainty and hope intertwine, propelling him into uncharted territory where transformation could thrive. The next challenge loomed. Could he sustain this openness amidst the very culture that had sought to suppress it? The following morning, Jake found himself in a state of restless anticipation. The fleeting sense of connection from yesterday's meeting both invigorated and terrified him. He stepped into the office, the sterile brightness of early light filtering through the windows, casting sharp shadows across the floor. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues flickering toward him, whispers trailing in the air, ripe with speculation. Had he crossed an invisible line? Conflict brewed within him as he navigated the hallways. On one hand, it was undeniable the risk he had taken felt revolutionary. But a nagging voice whispered that it was foolish, that maybe vulnerability had no place amongst the steel and glass towers of corporate America. As he settled at his desk, Jake carefully examined his feelings. He had shed a layer, revealed a part of himself that had remained shrouded in corporate decorum for far too long. But had he awakened a sense of accountability among his peers, or merely confused them? His heart raced with uncertainty as he processed the unexpected emotional terrain he now traversed. At mid-morning, he received an email from Max. The subject line read simply, "Meeting." Jake's stomach tightened. He had braced himself for the worst, a reprimand for stepping out of line, but instead, Max's tone was unexpectedly supportive. He wanted to discuss what Jake had shared and explore how they could implement similar openness within their teams. Jake sat back, contemplating this unexpected turn. Was Max truly interested in fostering a culture of honesty? Or was he merely trying to keep Jake tethered to the company's prevailing narrative? His instincts kicked in. Trust was fragile. He needed more than words to assess the sincerity of this overture. The meeting with Max was focused yet charged. They exchanged ideas about building transparency, but Jake listened closely, aware of the dance of ambition and authenticity happening beneath the surface. With each bullet point raised, he saw both the ceiling and the potential floor, an opportunity to reshape the very ethos of their workplace, yet an equally terrifying prospect that he could be the one to falter. "Jake," Max said, leaning forward, "you've initiated something powerful, but I want to make sure it doesn't stop here. How can we elevate this open approach in our department?" The question hung in the air. Jake sensed the moment was crucial. This was a chance to guide their culture away from impersonal metrics and toward a community where they could share their struggles and achievements alike. But how could he put this into action without reverting into the very roles they had adopted? "I think we should start with smaller, honest conversations, perhaps sharing during our weekly check-ins," Jake suggested, a lump forming in his throat. "We could encourage team members to speak about their challenges, not just their successes. Create a space where transparency is valued." Max nodded, a flicker of approval glinting in his eyes. "Let us pilot that. I expect some resistance, but if we stay committed, we may just soften this hardened environment." As Jake left the meeting, excitement coursed through him. Yet, creeping doubt lingered like a shadow. What if a cultural shift exposed deeper fractures? What if his call for vulnerability made colleagues uncomfortable, or worse, resulted in his professional demise? The noon light awaited him in the break room, where he absent-mindedly stirred his coffee, mind racing through possibilities. He glanced up, catching the eye of Angela, a colleague from finance. To his shock, she approached him, the hints of hesitation coloring her features. "I just wanted to say, Jake, what you shared yesterday resonated with me," she began. "I felt the same pressure to hide my struggles." His heart lifted slightly. Perhaps this was the connection he sought. But moments before he could respond, a frown crossed her face, morphing into something deeper: fear? Shame? As the words began to form on her lips, the faint sound of muffled laughter echoed from the adjacent office, derailing her. Hesitant confession into a wave of awkward defeat. Jake was left with questions hanging in the air. Would she give voice to her pain, or would the moment slip away into comfortable silence? The tension between vulnerability and restraint intensified within him, every heartbeat urging clarity and connection. Would he find the courage to navigate this delicate balance not just for himself, but also for those around him? As he turned back to his workspace, he felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders, compelling him to forge ahead. And with that, Jake became acutely aware that he was on the precipice of significant change, not just in his own life, but potentially in the way his organization operated. The need for belief in this shift stirred within him as he prepared to face the inevitable pushback. But what if a looming confrontation with Max forced him to reassess everything he had just started? One thing was certain. Jake understood that the journey ahead would uncover hidden truths for all, not just himself. Jake's anticipation settled heavily in his chest as the afternoon dragged on, each minute stretching out painfully. The meeting with Max had ignited a spark, but the fear of it being extinguished was palpable. He kept reviewing the intricacies of their conversation, hoping to bind the thread of connection he felt with Max, while equally uncertain of how to maintain that momentum. Late in the afternoon, as he sifted through emails, Angela's hesitant face resurfaced in his thoughts. He should have encouraged her to share more, to voice the struggles he knew echoed in his own heart. Instead, perhaps he had inadvertently reinforced the very forces of silence and shame he sought to upend. Would he have the opportunity to correct that? Or would the fear of vulnerability ultimately bind them all? When the clock struck 5, he reluctantly gathered his things, but the day felt incomplete. The drive home seemed longer than usual, and the world outside seemed to reflect his turmoil. It was gray and stormy. He pulled into his driveway, the click of the garage door reflecting the distinct mental click of realization. If he was serious about changing the corporate culture around him, he could not afford to hesitate. He had ignited the flame, but it was now on him to fan it into a fire. That evening, Jake sat down with a notebook. He jotted down his thoughts, aiming to clarify the vision he had brewing in his mind. The concept of smaller, honest conversations during their weekly check-ins could grow into an informal workshop, an open forum for discussing struggles alongside successes. Each line he wrote deepened his conviction, but he still felt the weight of ambivalence tugging at him. He could feel the call to action. There was a clear shift he wished to initiate, but how would others perceive this approach? Would Max support him, or would he falter in the face of corporate resistance? The tension simmered inside him, articulating itself in his restless movements around the house. He found himself wandering the kitchen, instinctively preparing a simple meal, while the prospect of the impending cultural shift danced in his mind. The stirring pots became a metaphor for the bubbling thoughts within him, chaotic yet compelling. That night, sleep eluded him. Thoughts spiraled, chasing each other. He felt the contours of both opportunity and risk sharp against his psyche. He envisioned the upcoming weekly check-in where he'd propose his ideas. Would he crash into the skepticism of his colleagues? Or would they embrace the vulnerability he was advocating? Each scenario played out in vivid detail, crafting a narrative of potential triumph laced with the agony of failure. As dawn broke, so did a firmer resolve. He would take the lead in his passion for creating space for authenticity. He pulled up the invitation for the next team meeting and stared at it. The words sounded too formal, too corporate. But he refused to let fear dictate how he would express this important initiative. He decided to reshape his approach. He would invite them personally, forge a connection, break the proverbial ice, and unveil the deeper intention behind his ideas. That as Jake began to craft an email, every keystroke felt monumental. This message would be different. It would emanate courage, a call for a new era in their workplace, and an appeal to shared humanity. He hesitated for a moment, that familiar self-doubt creeping in. What if they took a step back? What if they dismissed his vision altogether? But then, as he pressed the send button, an unusual clarity enveloped him. He understood that growth required risk, that initiating this conversation meant standing firmly on the precipice of vulnerability. It was not merely about sharing ideas. It was about shaping ideals into lived experiences. With adrenaline pumping, he noticed a message ping on his phone. It was from Max. "Let us catch up. I believe we're set for today's discussion." Jake's stomach flipped. A conflict was coming, one that held potential for disruption or incredible growth. The moment of truth was closing in. Would he be ready to defend his vision, or would he find himself caught in the maze of uncertainty? The stakes of authenticity loomed larger than before, the crossroads dancing before him as he prepared to face whatever Max had in store. Jake entered the conference room with a mixture of anticipation and dread swirling in his gut. The walls echoed with the faint hum of murmurs, colleagues gathering in their usual clusters, exchanging superficial pleasantries while the air crackled with tension. He focused on the meeting agenda projected onto the screen ahead, his heart racing as he remembered that ambiguous text from Max seated at the table. He exchanged nods with his peers, but felt a crucial barrier between them, an unbridgeable distance formed by the potential of his proposal. Today was not just about sharing ideas. It was about challenging the norm that had suffocated his team for so long. Could he motivate them enough to embrace vulnerability? As the coffee pot gurgled and dripped nearby, he felt strung between two very different worlds, the comfortable facade of corporate protocol and the urgent need for honesty. Max entered, and the room quieted. Jake studied him from across the table, the way he presented himself confident, authoritative, but also protective of the status quo that Jake was determined to breach. Max settled into his chair, a calculated smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks for being here, everyone. I hope you're ready to dive into productive discussions today," he started, his voice smooth yet commanding. Jake cleared his throat, the sound almost drowned out by the rush of his heartbeat. "I'd like to propose an additional segment to our meeting today," he interrupted, feeling the weight of eyes upon him. "It's about creating a space for open conversations, shared struggles, and successes. We need a workshop atmosphere where we can talk about what really matters to us beyond the numbers." A flicker of surprise ignited among his colleagues. He noticed Angela, sitting stiffly to his left, her expression a blend of curiosity and apprehension. Was she questioning his courage or her own? He plunged on, not allowing himself to falter. "I believe we can improve our morale and performance by fostering authentic dialogue. I know this is contrary to things we've done before, but change is necessary." Max's brow furrowed subtly. "Jake, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you know as well as I do that people aren't always comfortable discussing their personal issues in the workplace. Is this really the right time?" A knot tightened in Jake's throat. He felt the notion of reprisal pressing down on him. Yet, the memories of his own struggles propelled him. Personal battles should never be fought alone. They festered in silence. "Actually, Max, what if this is precisely the right time?" he replied, feeling emboldened by a newfound determination. The words came spilling out, unfiltered. Every one of us has faced challenges unique to our situations. From burnout to performance anxiety, the pressure to maintain the status quo has stifled us. This is not just about productivity, it's about our well-being and mental health. Shouldn't we care enough to at least try? Silence engulfed the room, palpable and heavy. Faces turned towards Max, seeking his response. The slight downturn of his mouth, the way his fingers drummed against the table, suggested he was weighing the potential fallout of Jake's suggestion that in that moment. Jake confronted his own fears. What if Max rejected him outright? What if this led to repercussions he was not prepared for? But the alternative, remaining silent while others continued to suffer, was intolerable. He recognized that this was more profound than professional development. It was a moral imperative. Max finally lifted his gaze, and Jake braced himself for impact. "You know I value innovation, But do you really believe the team will embrace this? Jake met Max's eyes, searching for cracks in his confidence. I believe they might surprise us if we lead by example, opening ourselves to be more authentic. Max nodded slowly, acknowledgement merging with skepticism. All right, I'll consider it. Let us hear the room's take on this idea. The air shimmered with possibility, tension replaced by a tentative spark of hope. As Jake glanced around the table, he sought to inspire connection among his colleagues, inviting them into a conversation that held power beyond corporate constraints. They could reshape their environment, redefine vulnerability, and influence change together. But even as the dialogue began to unfold, uncertainty gripped him. Would others lean in or shrink back? And what would he do if Max ultimately decided to suppress his initiative? In the moment of collective engagement, he realized he stood at a pivotal juncture. Would he falter and recede into the background? Or would he allow this experiment in authenticity to propel him and his team forward? As Jake's thoughts raced, he caught a fleeting glimpse of Angela's face. Was it fear or longing? And the question lingered in his mind. What untapped potential lay hidden behind their hesitation? Jake's heart raced as the room began to fill with voices, colleagues cautiously sharing their thoughts on his suggestion, a mix of encouragement and skepticism swirling around the table. He absorbed every word, each contraction of debate further solidifying his resolve. Yet, a gnawing anxiety took root. Would this be a moment of progress or an agonizing defeat? Angela finally spoke, her voice tremulous but steady. I think Jake's right. We often overlook the human element in our work. Maybe sharing our experiences will remind us why we're here in the first place. Jake felt a flicker of warmth at her support, but quickly tempered it with trepidation. Was this the collective acknowledgement they needed, or merely fleeting compliance? Jake's confidence surged with Angela's backing, and he seized the opportunity to pivot the discussion. Exactly. Imagine what we could achieve if we truly understood our personal challenges, not just professionally, but emotionally. It could change not only our productivity, but our workplace culture. We would be investing in each other. Several nods circled the table, but Max interjected. Investing is commendable, but are we equipped to manage the fallout? Not everyone is ready to divulge their struggles. This could backfire on us. A hush fell over the room as Jake recognized the gravity of Max's words. Behind the bravado of proposing vulnerability lurked the fear of exposing his own insecurities and the fear of unleashing others' pain. Would they be equipped to handle such raw honesty, or would it all lead to chaos? Jake swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears, and steeled himself to respond. We may not have the tools yet, but we can build them through this initiative. We can create a safe space for those who want to share. And for those who aren't ready, that's okay too. We can nurture an environment where we're not just colleagues, but allies. The words flowed traditionally, yet their weight felt new. He understood then that he wasn't merely advocating for change, but embarking on a journey that would require his own personal fortitude. As thoughts raced through his mind, doubts crept back, and would he truly be able to lead this initiative? Angela's eyes met his again, filled with encouragement, but he also saw something else. The same uncertainty he felt mirrored on her face. They were treading into uncharted territory, a place where their vulnerabilities might wreak havoc or thrive through shared strength. What if their shared willingness to be brave only resulted in discomfort, or worse, tearing down bonds that had felt solid? Calibrating his thoughts, Jake pivoted to focus on Max. Can we start small? Maybe a simple workshop where people can share just one challenge they face without delving too deeply? It's a step toward nurturing our relationships without overwhelming anyone. Max regarded Jake thoughtfully, weighing the merits of the suggestion. I appreciate your enthusiasm and your willingness to compromise, Jake. But you need to realize that implementing change involves risks, and you'll need to be prepared for how to manage or redirect those risks when they arise. Jake met Max's concerned gaze head-on, determination simmering beneath the surface. I know it's risky, but I can't shake the feeling that we owe it to ourselves to try. In that moment of exchange, something transformative shifted within Jake. It was as if he had peered beyond the veil, recognizing that this process wasn't merely about his colleagues. It was about his own courage in confronting the obstacles that had long shackled him. The juxtaposition of fear and resolve ignited a spark in him. All right, let us put this to a vote. Max decided, breaking the tension. If the majority of you believe this can yield positive results, I'll greenlight a pilot workshop. As hands began to raise, Jake felt a swell of pride mixed with anxiety. This was the first real chance to forge a new path, one that would redefine not just the way they worked, but also how they connected. But deep within, the question loomed larger than ever. Would this journey leave him empowered, or would it unravel him entirely? As Jake surveyed the room, he saw encouragement and fear reflected in their expressions. And in that moment of collective uncertainty, he knew he had to confront not just his colleagues' fears, but his own inner demons as well. The stakes were far higher than they initially seemed. The vote would not only determine the potential for change within the team, but also challenge Jake to embrace his vulnerabilities fully. Could he maintain his conviction under pressure? And would the journey to authenticity ultimately lead to liberation or profound vulnerability? The meeting concluded, but uncertainty lingered, amplifying the stakes for Jake. Each passing moment heightened the tension, prompting inward reflection on a daunting truth. This was just the beginning, and the path ahead threatened to confront the most unsettling aspects of his own life. The real challenge awaited the next step he'd need to take to navigate this new terrain. Where would this journey finally lead him? As Jake walked out of the meeting room, the emotions tangled in his chest. The morning sun filtered through the glass windows, casting shards of light that seemed to mirror his mixed feelings, optimism shadowed by a sense of impending challenge. He felt lightheaded, caught between excitement over the vote's outcome and the weight of potential repercussions. What had he unleashed by introducing vulnerability into a place so deeply entrenched in professional masks? He walked to his desk, each step measured but heavy with the enormity of the task ahead. The workshop, which had felt like a beacon of change just an hour before, now loomed over him like a storm cloud. He had rallied support, yes, but the atmosphere had shifted. Doubt now danced alongside hope. As he sat down, emptying his mind of the cacophony of voices that had filled the meeting, he confronted the truth. He was not just a facilitator of a project, but a participant in a deeply personal journey. Jake's hands hovered over his keyboard, paralyzed by a thought that nagged in the back of his mind. Was he really prepared for the emotions this initiative could unveil? He imagined colleagues sharing their woes, stories of failure, loss, and insecurity, and wondered if he could bear the weight of their shared burdens. Unable to focus, he pulled out a notebook that had been gathering dust. Flipping through the pages brought back memories of an earlier time, a time when he had pinned down aspirations that now felt quaint. One entry struck him. He had written about connecting with others on a more profound level. At that moment, he realized the irony of his apprehension. Wasn't this connection exactly what he craved? Making a decision, he set out to put that connection into practice. With newfound purpose, he decided to reach out to individuals who he felt might be hesitant about the upcoming workshop. He wanted to talk candidly, invite honesty, both his own and theirs. He identified 3 colleagues: a struggling analyst who had once been vibrant and sharp, a disillusioned manager who used to lead with flair, and a young intern with untapped potential and self-doubt. They all faced subtle challenges buried beneath their professional facades. One by one, Jake approached them, taking care to carve out quiet moments for conversation. With Angela by his side, he opened the floor for dialogue. Each encounter felt like a slow unwrapping, a quiet revelation of shared struggles framing their hard-earned successes. With each shared story, he felt barriers dissolve. As much as he was reaching out, they were reaching back to him. But the moments of connection also stirred something darker within Jake. The fear of being judged, of laying bare his own vulnerabilities alongside theirs. Would they see him as a peer, or shift perspectives now that his own walls were down? This fear loomed large, a specter of self-doubt that followed him into each conversation. That he reminded himself that he couldn't ask others to be brave if he wasn't willing to do the same. Still, every conversation left him feeling stripped, as if the act of sharing himself might fracture the solid foundation on which he had built his professional reputation. Yet, through the hesitations, a core truth blossomed. The more he illuminated others' struggles, the closer he got to his own truths. What was he truly afraid of? Not being liked, not being accepted, or perhaps failing to meet the expectations he had felt pressuring him since he started his career. The whispers of his past echoed louder, urging him to retreat to safety. Jake realized that he now stood at a pivotal fork in the road. Would he step into their shadows and share his own truths, or would he let fear of disapproval dictate his path? As the day wound to a close, he found himself facing the mirror in the men's room. The man looking back didn't reflect the bravado he often projected. Instead, he saw a person grappling with insecurities, seeking acceptance yet fearing it in equal measure. The revelation that emerged was profound. He could not lead a culture of openness while he remained closed off about his own struggles. With growing resolve, he decided he would not only attend the workshop as a facilitator, he would embrace his own vulnerability amid the collective. But as he left the restroom, an unsettling thought crept in. In this new endeavor to be authentic, would he unveil a side of himself that even he didn't understand? The journey for clarity stretched out before him, a maze of personal confrontation with no guarantees of triumph. And with that, the path toward the workshop loomed, the real challenge waiting just out of sight. Would he be able to confront the profound truths hidden within himself, or would he retreat once again into the safety of silence? Jake Thompson stood in the break room, a sense of purpose swirling within him. The workshop he envisioned had become more than an idea. It had morphed into a mission, one that would challenge him and his colleagues to confront their shared struggles and redefine their corporate identity. Today, as the meeting approached, clarity washed over him with each tick of the clock. He was no longer shackled by fear. He had embraced the vulnerability he once feared and recognized it as a source of strength. The moment arrived when he pushed open the door to the conference room, his nerves taut yet tempered by determination. Colleagues filed in, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As Jake took his place at the front, he met their gazes head-on, acknowledging the weight they all carried. With a deep breath, he began to speak. "Thank you all for coming," he started, feeling the tremor of anticipation beneath his words. "What we're about to engage in is a conversation, a space for open dialogue about our challenges and triumphs. No spreadsheets, just us. I'm here to share a personal story and hope that it invites you to share yours. We've spent too long behind the walls of professionalism, ignoring our humanity." He sensed the shift in the room as attendees leaned in, their defenses slowly lowering. Jake shared his struggles with anxiety, the pressure to perform, and the hollowness that had haunted him despite outward success. Each word wove a tapestry of shared experience that resonated deeply with his audience. As he spoke, Jake noticed eyes glistening with empathy and acknowledgement, flickers of recognition lighting faces across the room. "Change begins with vulnerability," he continued, "but it doesn't end there. I'm inviting each of you to share one challenge you face. Let us remember we're not just a collective of professionals, we're individuals with hopes, fears, and dreams." With a tentative yet palpable charge in the air, Jake stepped back, encouraging others to open up. Angela, the colleague who had initially supported him, broke the silence. "I've struggled with feeling inadequate at my job for years," she confessed. "Every project felt like a test that I could fail." Her voice quivered with honesty, igniting a chain reaction. One by one, voices began to emerge, stories of relentless comparison, burnout, and fears that had stunted growth. Jake marveled at the power of authenticity, realizing that this therapeutic exchange was something he had yearned for. The more they spoke, the more Jake felt anchored, even liberated. He no longer simply facilitated their dialogue. He realized he belonged to this collective, rooted in shared experiences. As the session evolved, the energy shifted, tension transformed into solidarity, fostering an environment where vulnerability flourished. And then, as the final moments approached, Max spoke up. "I might not have been on board with this at first, Jake, but today proved something vital. Your courage to introduce this conversation and our willingness to engage could redefine how we operate as a team moving forward." His nod was affirming, a subtle ripple of acceptance validating Jake's journey into authenticity. The session concluded, Jake's heart swelled with pride. They had transcended mere professional roles. They had unraveled the fabric of their facades, embarking on a journey toward mutual respect and understanding. Jake's attention shifted to the faces around him. Realizing he had helped cultivate an atmosphere that championed emotional transparency within the context of business, a feat he yearned to achieve. He stepped out of the conference room, The burgeoning sense of accomplishment resonated within him. The path of authenticity, though challenging, had nurtured a newfound connection not only with his colleagues, but also with himself. He had proven that success was not solely measured by profits and percentages, but rather by the bonds forged in collective vulnerability. Underneath his renewed confidence, a conviction took root. He would continue this initiative, establishing regular spaces for dialogue, what he would call courageous conversations. Each session represented a commitment to sustaining this transformative culture, fostering a productive environment where authenticity was cherished. Jake walked to his office, relishing a moment of self-acceptance. He had conquered his fears, forged deeper connections, and inspired his team to embrace their vulnerabilities. The title of CEO had transformed from mere status to a role steeped in responsibility and authenticity. It was not just a new beginning for him, but for the entire organization. Now, as he prepared to pen the details for the next courageous conversations, he reflected upon how far he had come. From a penthouse filled with emptiness to a corporate environment flourishing with human connection, he recognized his true achievement, one that blended success with significance. Jake felt fulfilled, an established leader anchored in authenticity, ready to face the future. It was clear. He was not just the captain of a thriving company. He was the architect of a culture shifting toward empathy and vulnerability. You need to subscribe now to witness more journeys of transformation and triumph. Leave a like now to support our mission of spreading authentic stories. It makes a profound difference. Comment your thoughts on this powerful ending and what resonates with your own experiences. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformation. Don't wait even one more second.